Lord God, our Father, there is no shadow of turning with thee. Thou changest not, thy compassion, they fail not. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercy I see. All I have needed, thy hands have provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Last verse. Pardon for sin and peace, peace that endureth. Thy own great presence to hear and to guide. Strength for today and bright hope for tomorrow. Blessings of mine with 10,000 sides. Great is thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness. Great is thy Amen.
Woo! Wow, that was awesome, Jennifer. I have no idea what that high note was. It was probably way above the treble clef somewhere. What kind of range do you have? Like 3 octaves, 4 octaves?
3 or 4.
Like Mariah Carey, she can.
Almost. When I was younger, probably. But yeah.
Oh, well, you're younger. You're young.
Yes, yes.
Well, we would love to do one more for us as our worship leader. Praise and worship.
One more?
One more.
Okay.
As my Latino friend say, uno más.
This is I'm like I know I don't know if y'all noticed since starting. I love worship songs. I love worship songs. I love, praise and worship, and I know I feel like I can connect God. I can connect God more with like fast songs, but I love spiritual. I love worship songs. Like when it's slow, you can take your time and worship God. So this next one is What a Friend We Have in Jesus.
Awesome.
Yeah. I want to sing. I was going to sing background music, but I'm going to sing it a cappella.
Yeah. Your acapella is a knockout punch. It's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful.
I know I usually do background music, but today, we setting some things up. So, okay. I heard this song. It touched my heart today. I heard this song and I was like, oh my gosh, what great is our faithfulness. Is I haven't, sang this song. We all grew up with this song. We all grew up with some hymns, us that we went to church. And was one of my favorite songs. It's always, just think about it, it's always so good to know that we have a friend in Jesus. And we can trust in him. We can go to him for anything, and what any problems they may have, we could just take it to him. Any situations, we could take it to him, and he's right there. Even if nobody else cares about us, or where people are talking about us, we could always remember that we have a friend in Jesus.
Amen.
No matter what, he's
Yes,
always our friend. What a friend we have in Jesus. All our sins and griefs to bear. What a privilege to carry everything to God in prayer. Oh, what peace we often forfeit.
Woo.
Oh, what needless pain we bear. Oh, because we do not carry everything to God in prayer. Every trials and temptation, is there trouble everywhere? We should never be discouraged, 'cause we need to take it to the Lord and pray. Can we find a friend so faithful, who will our sorrow share? Jesus knows our every weakness. Let's remember to take it to the Lord. Take it to the Lord and pray. And that's it.
Oh, wow. Thank you again, Jennifer.
Amen. We have to remember that. No matter what we're going through, take it to God in prayer.
Amen. Wow,
Amen.
that's a great message. Yeah,
Amen.
fantastic message. Well, I spoke to our third leader of the EAML Church, Tom, the Reverend and Gospel Star Tom Sly, and Tom, of course, he not only has a church, but he's a star gospel singer, and he's a youth counselor in Frederick County. For the other Frederick County schools, who has three things. So he's been a little distracted, but he's still very much on board, and he's going to try to make it next Thursday. So can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay. Well, we just lifted up of this time in prayer already. So what I'd like to share from the Bible is a very interesting story, a fun story, a real life drama in the Old Testament. We're going to recap and give some analysis on God's power and providence from the book of Esther. Now, the setting of this book is around the 5th century BC in the Persian city of Susa, S-U-S-A. And to give some biblical reference, for those of you who are familiar with the Old Testament chronology, the Holy Land was split into the northern and southern kingdom, and Judah was the southern kingdom, and they had, and their kings were more overall, more obedient to God, and and the people of Judah followed God, so they were blessed a lot longer, but eventually, they had a couple of real bad kings, and so God allowed Judah to fall and be taken captive to Babylon, and and then God's miracles started to work. Of course, in the book of Daniel, you'll see, how God had anointed him in amazing ways to touch the heart of a brutal king, Nebuchadnezzar, and eventually the offspring of Nebuchadnezzar, kind of fell away, even though Nebuchadnezzar became a godly king. His successor didn't, and so it fell to the Medes and the Persians. So, you had a series of kings. Cyrus was the first one, and in Cyrus, God just touched his heart, and he was the one who allowed the Jewish people to return to the Holy Land. And then under King Darius, which followed, there was an amazing story in Daniel where he was touched by God, and then when the God haters tried to have Daniel killed, God rescued him when Darius reluctantly had to throw him into the lion pit because he went against one of the edicts. But Darius, once he saw God's power, also intervened. Once the Jewish people went back to the Holy Land, to make it very clear that he had their support to build their second temple, and and he really, the non-Jewish overlords there, he was very strong. You do not interfere, with the Jewish people, or else we'll take a beam from your house and ring you through with it. He was very, very graphic. So this was, so the timing of the story of Esther is after Jewish people, a little less than 60,000 of them had returned to the Holy Land, but some of them did not. And and the king that followed Darius, his name was Xerxes, Xerxes, also known as Ahasuerus. He was in control of some of the Jewish people who lived in Persia, who did not go back. Now it's very interesting because most of the analysts say that it was God's will that the Jewish people returned to their Holy Land, but some of them did not. And so that's how they got in trouble. As we'll see, we pick up at the beginning of Esther, where Xerxes, who followed Darius, was the king of Persia, and and the Jewish people were scattered around Persia, but the main people had already gone back to the Holy Land, and were blessed by Cyrus and Darius before Xerxes. So the book of Esther starts with feasts. Now, Xerxes was kind of like a king that liked to have a good time. He threw parties and feasts and festivals, and and there was alcohol, and there was gluttony and everything, now Xerxes had a wife named Vashti. She was the queen, and Vashti was she had a little more integrity, and she said to the king, "Wait a minute now, with all that debauchery going on, all that craziness, I'm not going over there." So she had the gumption to stand up to the king and refuse to attend this feast where there's a lot of high-level officials there, and the king, of course, expected Queen Vashti to be there. Well, King Xerxes would have none of it. That he felt embarrassed in front of all these officials, and he conferred with them and basically had Vashti dethroned, deposed from the throne. And and then he said, "Well, we need another queen. Who are we going to get?" So they got they went out and got under control of some eunuchs in the palace. They went out and searched for some beautiful women, and they would compete. They would come in and and they would do a lot of things in terms of dressing up and looking good, and just a review which lasted about 12 months. Okay, so in this period where Xerxes was having all this long-term additions, basically for the king as well. I mean, for the queen, there was a beautiful Jewish woman named Hadassah, and who was also known as Esther. Okay, now Esther was raised by Mordecai, who was an older cousin, because Esther's mother and father had passed away. Now Mordecai, Esther's older cousin that raised her, he had a very adventurous kind of history. He was one of the Jews taken into captivity by the Babylonians, going back, that far, going back to King Jehoiachin. But now, of course, he was free because, when Cyrus and Darius intervened on behalf of the Jewish people, they were back to their Holy Land, they're building a temple. But Mordecai was one of the ones who was still kind of like in diaspora around Persia. And there are a lot of Jewish people who did not go back, and a lot of them were in Persia. Now, Xerxes, when he saw Esther, said, "Wow, and I think this is a God thing, because, there are a lot of beautiful women, a lot of very classy women there, and but Xerxes was like a lightning bolt going off, and he said, "Oh, Esther, yeah, she's the one," So Xerxes made Esther the queen. Now it's a very interesting aside here. Mordecai actually told Esther not to reveal her Jewish roots. because he knew the history, of how the Jewish people suffered horrible persecution, and the ones and Jewish people in Persia were not exactly exalted. So he was afraid maybe there'd be some persecution if Esther told Xerxes that she's a Jewish person. So Xerxes married a queen, but he didn't know her background. So there was a big celebration for Esther, the new queen. And right after that, there were a couple aides. And you can read all this. I'm not going to read word for word the whole book of Esther. But I recommend you read. It's not a long book, but the story is amazing. Now Xerxes had two close advisors, and they had evil on their mind. They for whatever reason they did not want Xerxes there, and so they organized a plot to have him overthrown, and actually have him killed. Now, interesting, Mordecai, who Esther's older cousin, very, very resourceful. And he was able to find out or get wind of the plot of these two people, the Bignatha and Teresh, were the names of these conspirators against Xerxes. And he found out about it. So he alerted Esther. So basically, Mordecai and Esther were the ones who notified King Xerxes of this plot. Well, Xerxes, conducted investigation and found that it was true. So, so Xerxes just had these co-conspirators hanged. He didn't fool around. Now Mordecai and Esther serving King Xerxes here was a real miracle, because it's kind of a precursor for an earthquake-like event that would happen later on. I mean, this was like God, through his providence, setting up something amazing, but put this piece in place, where Esther and Mordecai actually saved the king, Xerxes, from being overthrown and killed. Now there was a guy who was from an Agathite tribe. His name was Haman, Haman, and and he was a very loyal official to King Xerxes. So so Xerxes raised him up and made him second in command in the Persian Empire. And but Mordecai, suspected. I mean, Mordecai's amazing, because not only was he resourceful, but he was very discernful, because God was like, through his spirit, Mordecai kind of suspected in spirit that Haman was a pretty evil kind of guy, very aggressive and very self-centered kind of guy. So what happened was, when Haman, since he was the second in charge after Xerxes, when he walked by, all the people were expected to bow down to Haman, just like they would bow down to Xerxes. Well, Mordecai refused to bow down to him. Okay, which to me showed a lot of guts and a lot of character, because I think he sensed that God was kind of working through him. So he was not afraid of Haman. He refused to bow down to him. Predictably, since Haman was a pretty scoundrel kind of guy, pretty evil, he got enraged at Mordecai, because it was like it's like a pride thing. He's a very prideful person, very powerful, very prideful. So, this Jewish guy, not, you know, uh, not bowing down, was like, the end of the world for him. It's like, oh, wow, disrespected me. Now, they know Mordecai was Jewish, even though they didn't know Esther was Jewish, but they did know Mordecai was Jewish. So, so Haman, in his rage and evil, not only conspired to try to have Mordecai killed, but he wanted to punish all of Mordecai's people by having a genocide against the Jewish people in Persia. I don't know how many people were there, but there was a lot of them. And, it would have been, like, he was like Hitler, of Persia. I mean, that's how bad he was. I mean, he was going to exterminate all the Jewish people in Persia. And he actually, went and, slandered all the Jewish people in front of Xerxes. Said, well, they're troubled, all this stuff, just a bunch of lies. And actually got Xerxes to sign an order to, which would designate a certain time of the month and time of the year for the Jewish people to be slaughtered. It was the 12th month on the 13th day, and it was selected by a lot, or what they called in the New Testament P-U-R, which later became a very significant because it led to a Jewish holiday. Now, again, Mordecai is very resourceful, and God was with him, and he found out about this plot. I mean, if it was a secret, God had allowed Mordecai to find out that Haman had convinced Xerxes to have the Jewish people slaughtered. All right. Well, so what does Mordecai do? Well, he goes to his cousin, the queen, and tells her about this plot. I mean, obviously she's. I mean, if I'm Esther and I'm hearing this, I'm thinking, wow, this is really bad, and at first, understandably, she's kind of afraid, she didn't know what to do, because she's Jewish now, and Mordecai said, well, it's like, just because you're the queen, if this isn't stopped, what's to stop Xerxes from killing you too? Okay. Now, another complication for Esther trying to have Xerxes stop this is that there was a royal decree in Persia, and that is that you do not approach the king, Xerxes, and ask him for something, because if you do, you're automatically killed. Anyone who approached the king was killed. Okay. Now the exception is if the king extends a golden scepter, to a person, then that gives that person the right to, to ask the king. Okay. But without that, if you approach Xerxes without that kind of permission, just out of the blue, are you going to be executed? Well, Esther. Oh, here's where it gets really good, and it gets better. Esther finally found the courage to approach King Xerxes without being invited. But first, she said, she told Mordecai, and this is, how God works, to have the Jewish people in Susa, pray and fast for 3 days. Okay, to just cry out to God, for deliverance through prayer. Okay, so here is where God starts to do some really miracles. Okay, so Esther is ready to approach Xerxes, even though she could get killed by just walking up to him and asking him for anything. But while she was waiting to see him, guess what? Xerxes extended the golden scepter to Esther. She was just standing in his court, didn't say anything, and Xerxes just touched her with the tip of a scepter. Yeah, it's a miracle from God. God is right. That's God's providence. So Esther did not immediately say anything about Haman. What she said is she asked for a private banquet with her, King Xerxes, and Haman. Okay. Well, Xerxes, again, it's the hand of God here, agreed to the banquet suggestion, and actually told her that not only agreed to the banquet, said, "Hey, I love you." I mean, he just loved her so much that he said that he would grant, like in advance, he said that he would grant her request up to half the kingdom. I mean, let me say that again, up to half the kingdom. Now that's amazing love, and that's amazing power of God. Okay. Now here we have we have to look at a quick analysis here. Esther faced a strong temptation here. I mean, she could just take half the kingdom and keep her mouth shut, right? All the material wealth, keep her mouth shut, and let all the Jewish people be slaughtered and save her butt that way, But she made a righteous choice by choosing God and innocent lives over money and power. I mean, that's why she's one of the major heroines in the Bible, and probably so many parents named their daughter Esther because Esther was such an amazing person in the Bible. Now we see the hand of God again, where Xerxes is kind of stirred in the middle of the night with restlessness. Okay, and again, I guess he gets some kind of thought, he was prompted to review to have these chronicles of the king, the king and his reign, kind of a history. And lo and behold, God, in stirring Xerxes during the night, prompted him to remind him that Mordecai had saved the king's butt from being executed, from being overthrown and killed by these evil conspirators. So it's like, okay, so Xerxes says, okay, I need to honor Mordecai. And here's where it gets really wild. Okay. So while this was going on, Haman comes into Xerxes, okay? And he's just waiting to tell Xerxes about his plan to hang Mordecai. Because, he's already gotten the king's approval, like on the 12th month and 13th day, to slaughter the Jewish people, but he had not actually pitched the execution of Mordecai yet. In fact, Haman had even, with conspiring with his wife and some other people, actually built gallows to hang Haman. To hang Mordecai. Okay, so and you can't make this up. What happened. I mean, this is like pure Hollywood, but it's perfect Hollywood because God's timing and providence is perfect. God's poetic justice is perfect. So Haman is standing there waiting to tell Xerxes, we need to hang Mordecai. But before Haman can say that, Xerxes speaks first to Haman and says he wanted to honor a special person. Okay, and he said to Haman, how do you recommend we honor this person? Well, so Haman, since he's very prideful and he's such a big shot and this big powerful person, and he's saying, oh, Xerxes wants to honor me. He assumed that Xerxes wanted to honor Haman himself. Okay, so Haman answers Xerxes, well, if you're going to honor this great person, put on the king's robe and have him ride on the king's horse. pretty aggressive request, right? Just like, hey, I'm a big shot. I'm gonna show off with the king stuff. All right. So Haman is thrilled, thinking it's for him. So Xerxes then lowers the boom, and this is 180-degree wacko. He says, the person I want to honor is Mordecai, the guy that Haman was going to tell Xerxes to hang just a few minutes earlier. Oh man, God is so amazing. So so imagine this. Haman is all excited about this evil idea of having the king Xerxes approve Mordecai's execution, but Haman actually had to put on Xerxes' robe on Mordecai and actually help Mordecai get on Xerxes' horse. Well, talk about 180-degree, maybe this is where the expression came, pride before the fall. Went from power and pride to absolute terror. Okay. So he runs home. His wife was Resh, who is a co-conspirator with all these evil plans to slaughter Mordecai and the Jewish people. And she just, I don't know if there's a Persian equivalent to this common American street slang. There probably is. And I could just see her in a Persian saying, man, Haman, you are screwed. I mean, she just laid it on him, and it's like, from then on, God just took this guy apart piece by piece. And it started with the banquet where Esther at that point told Xerxes about Haman's plot to kill all the Jewish people. And now the thing is that of course Xerxes wasn't surprised by that because he had signed the document. But the way God had kind of like worked on him, and he kind of did a between just seeing through Haman, and his love for Esther and everything, and and so he said no, he sided with Esther, and then it got even more graphic in the sense that he left in anger at Haman, not at Esther, and when he was gone, Haman was on his knees begging Esther. Esther was like laying down on a couch or something, and Haman approached her, and and was begging her to, to be merciful to him. And of course, he's now with a tail between his legs. He's terrified. Well, Xerxes walks in while Haman is approaching Esther on this couch, and assumes that he's out to molest Esther. Now, of course, that wasn't the truth. He didn't even ask Mordecai's point of view. He was so mad at Mordecai that he had his guards cover Mordecai's face and just take him not Mordecai, but Haman's face, and take him out of there. So the bottom line is that Haman made these gallows for Mordecai, but Haman was the one hanged on the gallows that he had made. And then of course, after Esther's pleas, he was going to give Esther half the kingdom. So of course he was going to abide by Esther's request, and that is to save the Jewish people, and to get, and to kill the evil people that were going to slaughter the Jewish people. So it was so that's what happened. God rescued the Jewish people through these series of providence and miracles, and and so the Jewish holiday of Purim, based on the Pur, the lot, was established in honor of the Jewish people being protected. And then this amazing, perfect Hollywood story of God, poetic justice. The book of Esther ends with Mordecai being elevated to second in command. So you had the Queen Esther, and then Mordecai second in command, in terms of the officials. So that's pretty much how the story of Esther ended. And and just to look at the analysis of this, it's God's providence, since he had special plans for the Jewish nation. Esther was only one of two books in the Bible named after a woman. The other, of course, was the book of Ruth, which was also a providential story, because Ruth was in the genealogy of the Messiah, Jesus. So this was a redemption story. How we, excuse me a second, Peach. The dog was excited about, about Esther's thing. So it's redemption of Jewish people. And it's a foreshadowing of the redemption that we get from Jesus Christ. It's a great exchange. We're sinners. We're separated from God. Jesus is perfect. God is perfect. Jesus is perfect because he's Son of God, fully God and fully man. So, since we're sinners and God is perfect, we are not to expect anything except wrath, and have our sin just bring us down. But Jesus, through his mercy, they call it the great exchange, Jesus took our sin on his behalf and gave us his righteousness. That was God's plan for how fallen humans are reconciled to God. So that great exchange happens when we accept Jesus as our Lord and Savior. And we've already talked about the evidence of the resurrection. We've already talked about how the Bible is true, so I'm not going to go over that again. But the most important decision we have to make is for Jesus Christ. And this has implications for America because, if God allowed Judah to fall because of people turning against God, the same thing can happen to us if we turn away from God. I'm just going to read a couple of scriptures before we close. Deuteronomy 31, verse 18. And see, it's right here. I'm going to read it right now. And this is God speaking to Moses from the heavens. And I will certainly hide my face on that day because of all the wickedness in turning to other gods. So that is God warning us about turning away. But a Psalm 137 verse 6 actually has kind of a prophecy about Esther, the book of Esther. And I'm going to read Psalm 137 verse 6. May my tongue cling to the roof of my mouth if I do not remember you, if I do not consider Jerusalem my highest joy. And the implication is, the Jewish people were silent because of disobedience. They were like, they were far from God, but God did not forget them. He loved them, and in His providence, we can see in Ephesians chapter 1, verse 11. In Him we were chosen, having been predestined according to the plan of Him who works out everything in conformity with the purpose of His will. So that speaks to God's providence. Predestination, we don't get into, this whole thing about, since God is predestined everything, we don't have to do anything because God's going to do it anyway. See, we don't know, we don't see all God's plan, but a predestination in the Bible really talks about God's providence, because God has a plan, and the Bible is a work that God has created, through His chosen people as a masterpiece to show His plan and His ultimate moral authority. And I just want to close by saying this. I mean, we've seen some amazing things happen. And one commentator, in the book of Esther, one commentator said that, that if the Jews perished in Persia, how that impacted the events leading up to the Messiah. God had put everything there, and we can't fool with God. God is holy. He's powerful. He's magnificent. He's loving. He's perfect. We are to not play with God. We need to be in awe of God. And I'll just close with an analogy. Let's just say you're 75 years old and have asthma, and say, "Oh, I'm not afraid of this coronavirus. I'm going to walk into a hospital and I'm going to show how tough I am, and I'm going to hug all these coronavirus people and say, well, I'm not going to get this, Well, if you think that is crazy and stupid, doing the same thing against God, mocking God, going against His Bible, going against His moral authority, is just as stupid as somebody doing something like that, coronavirus, multiplied by infinity. because that's what God is. God is infinity, beyond anything we can imagine, is beyond the vastness of the universe and the tiniest particles. God's showing how powerful He is. So, okay, well, I just want to wrap up this and as always, we highlight a Christian charity that is helping people with COVID. And again, we're going to mention churches helping churches because there's been a big movement. Paul's had a big rally. It was an online rally and benefit concert featuring a lot of Christian artists of different races and cultures and leaders and sports figures also. Headlined by Ben Watson, who was a retired tight end. He played for the New England Patriots and some other teams, and they raised over $200,000. And there's a movement that to try to keep churches alive in the inner city and rural areas and maybe struggling because to keep the gospel alive during COVID, the churches have to be alive too. Well, that's one of them. So, I just encourage you all to go back and check churches helping churches. The website is churchrelief.org. So, so I just want to wrap this up. Any prayer requests before we, from any of you wonderful people before we wrap this up? Anybody?
Thank you, Doug, for organizing. I enjoy your story very much. I mean, not your story, but your reading of the story.
Well, it's only by the grace of God, and we have we've had different people on EAML. We've had people from Mississippi and now from Indiana. So eventually, we're gonna get somebody from outside the United States on this. That's the plan.
Totally.
So,
yeah, totally.
Jennifer, you want to close us out with prayer?
Thanks for the message today. It's a good message. I like the story of Esther. Heavenly Father, I thank you, Lord, for another day. I thank you, Lord, for this service tonight. I thank you, Lord, for Doug. I thank you, Lord, for all that joined who listened to your word. I thank you, Lord, for being in this place. I thank you for our gifts. Please continue. I pray for those who are still struggling in this time right now with COVID, those who are trying to strive, those who are struggling. It could be health-wise, it could be bills, it could be anything. Almost losing their home, anything that's in this world right now, because I know the economy is going down. The Lord, show yourself, Lord. This is the time we ask, Lord, that you show yourself more and more. And please come and comfort us and show us the way. Show us how to lean on you and your every word, oh Lord. And oh Lord, I just ask you to protect us, oh Lord, in this time as well. That those who are still holding on by a thread, that you continue to help us, succeed in everything that we need to do, oh Lord, and continue to move forward each and every day. Thank you, Lord, for the word again. I thank you, Lord, for the gifts. Thank you, Lord, for your presence. Thank you for your mercy. Thank you for your Son, Jesus Christ. You down across our sins. Your Son, just not pray. Amen.
Amen. And
Amen.
And we'll see you all next Thursday, and probably our co-leader Tom Sly, and please bring other people in. And Sharon, it's great seeing you, and I'll pray that everything goes well for your dissertation defense, and you get your PhD, and then you can maybe the economy will get better as they open up, and hopefully get a vaccine and a treatment. And, I just pray that the next few weeks and months I'll see some improvement. I always, try to look at the positive. I look at COVID news. I have a 9-to-1 plan. for every piece of bad news, I try to find 9 pieces of good news. Sometimes it's hard to find 9 to 1, but that's that's what I want to do. Like what they're doing with vaccine research and people claim they have a cure.
Well, I
like
actually very, I actually, I think I converted my mom to a Christian yesterday because of COVID.
oh, well, that is
Yeah,
that celebration in heaven.
yeah,
Congratulations, Sharon. That's
yeah,
wonderful. Well, we will
yeah. I mean,
Congratulations.
yeah,
we will end this EAML church on this wonderful, upbeat celebration that there's another follower of Jesus Christ, and I know since it's family, I know that you're thrilled, and we're thrilled with you. So